This information you are about to hear and perhaps view, these are not necessarily the thoughts or the ideas of Gary C.Clement or the Gary Clement Radio Show podcast. We are in no way, shape, or form affiliated with the parties the story is about or was interviewed for. Parts of this content may not be owned by or the property of the Gary Clement Radio Show podcast, G2 Network Media, or any other company we are affiliated with, and this information is strictly the opinion of those being interviewed. This content is for information purposes only, and although we may make reference to various news stories, we share our own independent beliefs about the content and provide our own opinions. Please enjoy the information. Hi, my name is Gary C. Clement, and welcome to the Gary Clement Radio Show and Podcast. Today on the show, we welcome Attorney Daniel Cotter, who's from Chicago, Illinois. He's a corporate and transaction attorney who's also a trusted business advisor. He specializes in the Supreme Court, rule of law, fundraising, and just an overall experienced business lawyer. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, and thanks for having me, and great to speak with you.
Welcome. Yes. So first of all, tell us about who you are, how you came to be this big-time attorney, and just what all is going on and stuff in our government these days.
Sure. I grew up in Chicago. I'm the son of a Chicago police officer and eventually sergeant who served for more than 30 years. My grandfather was a firefighter. Went to a small liberal arts college in central Illinois to play football and was successful there. I met my wife. Had an accounting degree and worked for an accounting for a while, and then went to law school at night and became a lawyer, and have worked in both in insurance companies and in private practice in law firms for almost 30 years now. And my focus is primarily on a couple of things. One is a lot of insurance-related matters. I also do a lot of outside general counsel and guide my clients through hurdles so that they can do their business. There's quite a bit of privacy and cyber. I've been doing that since '96. And my part-time hobby and thing that I really enjoyed doing is I'm an amateur historian on the Supreme Court and on the Constitution, and wrote a book in 2019, The Chief Justices, about the history of our country through the center seat of the Supreme Court, and write a weekly column in the Chicago Daily Law Bulletin, Cotter's Corner, mostly about the Supreme Court, but we talk about other interesting things as well.
I see. Okay. So I guess just early on, what fascinated you about law, about the practice of law, actually?
The reality is my first exposure to law. Like I said, my dad was a police officer, so had a little bit of kind of exposure to that, but not a whole lot. He really didn't talk about his work, just like I wouldn't talk about work to my kids. I had a situation in my undergrad. There was an unfortunate an incident on campus, a sexual incident, and I was the student rep on it. So that kind of exposed me again to kind of the workings of law, and I had some interest. But when I graduated undergrad, like I said, I was an accountant. I took the CPA exam. I passed it, and when I got a notice from the National Football Foundation that I had a postgraduate scholarship about to expire, I talked to my wife and said, I really don't want to get my MBA because I've got the CPA and I've got kind of a business background, so I'm going to challenge myself. And I sought to audit a class in all the law schools in the Chicago area. I said, no, that's not possible. You have to take the exam and then go to law school. So I did. And what really fascinated me, Gary, about the law was just, it just was really, for me, it was a challenge intellectually and trying to grasp some of the concepts of law. But I really fell in love with it. And unlike a lot of folks that, law school was not great for them, I really, after the first semester at least, I really enjoyed my law school experience. And that's what really fascinated me with the law.
I see. Okay. Now, you mentioned just a little bit ago that you basically wrote a book in regards to the Supreme Court. And tell us a little bit more about that, I guess, and because I got some things that I kind of want to, understand about that.
Sure. So one of the things that I noticed at law school and any education, Gary, I think is the reality is that you have these situations where you get snippets of things, but you never really get the context of what's going on or what's happening at the time. You just get these kind of blurbs from various cases throughout history. And so my undergrad was a liberal arts school, like I said. So they really, I think they make you a lifelong learner and intellectually curious. And so I wanted to kind of, I had a lot of books on the Supreme Court in my house that I started collecting. I've really was fascinated by the Supreme Court. And so I looked, and there really wasn't anything that kind of told the history of the Supreme Court and the United States through this perspective. And so I started to shop the idea of writing this book that would go from the first Chief Justice, John Jay, through the current Chief Justice, John Roberts. There's been 17 Chief Justices, and kind of tell it in a more accessible fashion. And so each chapter in the book, first it talks about the Chief Justice and the fact that it really doesn't, he's the Chief Justice, but he doesn't really have a whole lot of extra powers from the other justices that sit with him. But he does have a certain kind of leadership roles. And each chapter of the book then focuses on each of these chiefs and kind of talks about some of their big cases and big issues and what was happening in the country at that time. And so we cover 230 years of U.S. history in the book.
Mm-hmm. I see. Okay. Now, one of the big issues or whatnot about the Supreme Court, in regards to talking to people that are in my world or in my circle or whatnot, from day to day, is that when it comes down to the lifetime appointment of being on the Supreme Court, what are your thoughts about that?
I think that's what the Constitution says. It says on good behavior. I think that I think the founders, I'm not sure that they expected that folks would sit on the court as long as they do. And the reason for that it was a couple things. One was that it was thought to be that these folks that sat on the Supreme Court would not have political views and would just do what was kind of best for the country and interpret the Constitution. And we can debate whether that happens or not. But I think that there's been efforts to kind of change this. I think the problem, frankly, is that at least is the way that the Constitution's drafted and the way that this is done right now, it'd be very difficult to change it. And I do think there would be something beneficial if we went to a different system so that they're not there for life.
I see. Okay. So I guess the answer for that then, what I'm interpreting is that you two are not 100% down with the fact that they have lifetime appointments.
Yeah, I'm not, and especially in light of we saw in the last several vacancies when Scalia died and some other things, the way that the Senate of the party of the president and things have kind of manipulated to put together a court that they believe will rule in favor of the way that they of their judicial philosophy. And the challenge is we have a court right now that's pretty conservative, 6-3 court. Although there's talk about it being a 3-3-3 court right now, but we have a conservative court right now, and so the reality is that many of them are fairly young, and so we've got this court that's going to continue to what in some people's mind is constrict or reverse rights that have been previously found to exist. And when that happens, we can be in for a long period of time here where we're kind of waiting for things to change, and it's kind of random when it will change or not. When people retire or become incapacitated or pass away. So that's the challenge, I think, of lifetime tenure.
I see. Okay. One major issue for me right now is how they are handling, former President Trump. How do you feel? What are your thoughts there?
Well, I think on the immunity question, I think we're going to, get to either this week or next week. The court will likely finish its work by a week from Friday, so June 27th, so they can get out of D.C. before the 4th of July week. From the oral arguments and from where it's at, and the fact that case has not come out, I get the sense that they are going to find some instances of immunity for a president, and I think that's not in keeping with the founders. I don't think that's keeping with history and tradition. We had a case that went to the court in 1973 or 74, U.S. versus Nixon, that had to do with executive privilege and all of that, and we have a situation where that's. I think they're going to come out with some kind of compromise position, and I think it's worrisome because I've used the reference to a John Gotti presidency, right? So John Gotti could get into the White House and then conduct his being the Godfather, wipe down all kinds of opponents and enemies, and all of that would be immune from prosecution. That can't have been anybody's idea of how this should work.
I see. Now, I guess my other question too would be, when it comes to the Constitution and everything that Trump has done, where does where are we there? What does that what's going on there in your opinion?
Well, I think that this idea, if the question is about him being on the ballot, I think the court got that right. I don't think states should be in the market of determining who could be on the ballot without some other events taking place. But I think many of us worry that this court, at least in some fashion, will, if not outright endorse, kind of allow or permit or accept kind of the behaviors of President Trump, and what that it's bad for what things he's done and what I think he's done, but I think it's also bad for future presidents again, because at some point, again, we if you look at the Constitution and stuff, again, it wasn't the intent of the founders that this person was an unaccountable king, right? That was the biggest fear, I think, when we formed this Constitution, was that we had just won the battle with the United Kingdom and England, right? And we didn't like that process. We had just torn away from a monarchy that could do it as it pleased.
I see. This is a very interesting time to be a law student. For law students now who are experiencing all that's happening with politics in our country now, what is one thing that you would point out to them that is an incorrect interpretation of the law, I guess you could say?
Well, there are a number of things. I think I've written about some of these. I think one thing that has been misinterpretation and misreading of the Constitution is the Second Amendment and the treatment of guns. And there's a big case before the Supreme Court that, again, will be divisive, but we'll see how Justice Amy Coney Barrett weighs in on it. But it has to do with people that have committed domestic violence. There's laws that say that you can't own firearms if you've been convicted of domestic violence for some obvious reasons. The Second Amendment talks about a well-regulated militia, and for the first 180 or 90 years, we kind of interpreted that one way. The Supreme Court only had one case about it. Chief Justice Warren Burger, who was the justice that was in the center seat when Roe v. Wade and some other cases came down, talked about the fact that the interpretation of the Second Amendment was the worst interpretation of law he'd seen. But again, that's where we're at today. So I think one of the things I would suggest to them is that no matter what judicial philosophy you're looking at, or you look at opinions, you have to weigh through the lens of some of this stuff, history and tradition, and some of the ways that are applied, originalism and other tools that it can be perceived and might actually be result-oriented, outcome-driven applications. And I've flippantly or facetiously said at times, Gary, that it's sort of like the folks that follow the Nostradamus predictions, right? Because Nostradamus, they change words or they remove words that are inconsistent with things that have happened, that this astrologer and prognosticator way back I forget when he was alive, but predicted allegedly all these things that would happen in the world.
I see. Okay. And what also just kind of got me or whatnot too is like, what's allowed by members of the Supreme Court and what's not allowed. There's been quite a bit of talk about, Judge Clarence Thomas receiving luxury trips in cars and houses and all this stuff. And, what's fair and what's off limits?
Well, again, I think that there's a real appearance of, if not actual, issues here. And again, does that make him? Is he criminal? No, but it has the real bad stench to it. And the amounts are not inconsequential. More than $2 million over the last 10 years, and maybe even more than that, because, one of the things that I think is most troubling that I've written about quite a bit of times is that he's constantly been outed for these trips that he hasn't disclosed. And then, a week or two ago, he did his financial disclosures. And then the next day, one of the investigative reporters noted that there's 3 other trips that he hasn't reported. And again, I think, one of the things that I don't know if anything's going on or not, but the reality here is you wonder if he's reporting these on his income taxes, right? Because that's how Al Capone went down.
Right. Tax evasion.
You wonder, like, that's $2 million of income that has to be reported. And
right.
If he's not reporting them on his financial disclosures, which can be problematic and is problematic, it's that you submit those under oath. It has the appearance, I think, for lawyers, non-lawyers, anybody that's looking at it, as you mentioned, Gary, I think it has the appearance of just someone that doesn't care what anybody thinks, right? And if I were in that situation, for example, like, if you got audited or if you had a mistake, why wouldn't you be overly transparent, right? To avoid these types of situations. But, it happens over and over again. And there's an organization, Fix the Court, that's had some numbers last week when these financial statements came out. And they, had the actual numbers that were reported. And then they talked about a number of trips and other things that probably were not in the financial disclosure still. And again, it just has an appearance that things are not on a level playing field. And, that's, to me, is the biggest, the biggest issue here is we don't know what's going on, but it's obvious that he's being rewarded and compensated for, for who knows what, right?
Right. So do you think that John Roberts then should push to actually have him to be removed or whatnot from the court? And it doesn't look like it's going to happen like that, but what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, it's funny because in that column I mentioned at the beginning, Cotter's Corner, a week ago Monday, I wrote about that, or this past Monday, in fact, that Roberts has remained silent. And again, the Chief Justice doesn't have the power to remove anybody. That's not his job. But I use the example. If you go back to 1968, there was a Justice, Abe Fortas, who was on the court. And when Chief Justice Earl Warren gave his notice to LBJ that he wanted to retire, the Nixon campaign went on full alert and dug up some stuff. Turned out that Abe Fortas, and again, it may have been wrong, but he was no criminal charges were to be filed. He had accepted a $20,000 honorarium on an annual basis from a former client. One of the clients had some business before the court, and Earl Warren was given some of this evidence. He met with the other 7 justices of the court, not with Abe Fortas. He told his secretary, meaning Abe Fortas, has to go. And the next day, Abe Fortas resigned from the court rather than, impugn the legacy or have them under a cloud. And what's happened here is Chief Justice Roberts, he's been very reluctant to really express any kind of views on any of this stuff. And again, he has on occasion when President Trump was attacking judges, he came out with a statement. When the leak of the Dobbs decision came out a year ago, where that was all going on, he came out with very forceful statements about the court and the integrity. So he speaks when he wants to, but yeah, I don't think he's going to do anything here. And again, I think one of the things that he professed and that he really talked about at his confirmation hearings was the legacy and the image of the court. And I think I don't rank him in my book because he's still a sitting Chief Justice, but if and when he retires and I do an update, I don't know that he's going to necessarily rise to the top third of Chief Justices, because that's one of the few powers they have, right, is to speak as a court and to influence how we as the public view the court. And like you said, I don't think he's going to do anything in this case, which is unfortunate, but that seems to be his approach to these issues.
Right, I see. Okay. So there is the Constitution, in which, like I said, of course, it's already written, and it's not going to change, anywhere. I guess it's just the interpretation that can only change. Then there's the Supreme Court, and I think, it looks as if in a lot of different situations, in my opinion, they have a tendency to sway one way or the other. Then there's Congress, in which I feel like they are very wrong in a lot of instances. What are your thoughts there? Because this Trump thing is that's the talk of everything now because of all of the politics involved. What are your thoughts there?
About Congress and how they are behaving?
Correct, yes.
Is that the question?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, I think looking back on this, when somebody, 20 years from now or longer, maybe it's you and I talking to Gary, but the next folks looking back on this, I think that'll be the one question. I think I just I marvel every day at the fact that how the GOP has rallied and is just seems beholden to Trump, and they support him and his things at all costs. They are talking about how they're going to have retribution because Donald Trump was convicted in New York in state court. They talk about how Hunter Biden, should go to jail and do things, and again, that's his writing about things in the book about being, under the influence of things while he was getting a gun. Not the smartest things in the world, but it's to me it's kind of breathtaking, and the 100% buy-in of this guy who, again, I'm not sure whom he's ever given back anything for. Right? It's a one-way street, it seems, with him, and I'm just surprised that the Congress has just become kind of a mouthpiece and the focus exclusively in the House right now with their slim majority. is in fact on supporting him and putting in pieces. I've read about legislation possible that a president can never be indicted, about some other things. And again, it's, to me, I'm sure folks have different views of it, but it's kind of astounding to me. And it's a sad statement, because one of the things that's going to happen from the Supreme Court is there's the case that was decided in the early 1980s, Chevron, that gives authority to administrative agencies. I think that the Supreme Court is going to narrow that kind of autonomy of the agencies and their delegation, and Congress is going to have to step up. And I've had these conversations with many folks. I don't know that Congress, as it's currently constituted, is capable of solving any of these issues that we have before us. And that's a sad statement, I think, on where this nation might be headed.
Mm-hmm. Right, I see. Okay. So as far as, young people are concerned, they're watching all of these different things and whatnot now. What is your advice to them about possibly getting into politics or getting into, law, or, what's your advice, period, to young people about a lot of these issues now?
Yeah, I'm not someone that discourages people from going into politics or going into law or going into, whatever profession they deem to be appropriate. What I would suggest is that, if you're going into politics, try to emulate, how things used to be, and the one person I think that I would suggest they look at is a former senator from Illinois. His name is Everett Dirksen, and Everett Dirksen was a Republican in the Congress when it was overwhelmingly Democrats, a lot of Southern Democrats, so a lot of interesting issues. But for Everett Dirksen and his ability to do what was best for the nation at the time in 1964 and 1965, we probably wouldn't have had the Civil Rights Act or the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And do the JFK thing. Ask not what you can do for yourself. Right? Is that the phrase? But what you can do for your country. As we've been talking about for the last 30 minutes, Gary, I think there's a lot of issues that need to be solved, and lawyers are an effective way to do it. Young people should go into that with the thought of, again, improving the nation. My boys were both in Boy Scouts, and the theory of camping and things there is to leave the places not just so that there's no signs that you were there polluting, but also to make it better for the next folks that come along. And so I have two sons, one 27 and one 24, and I talk a lot and mentor a lot with undergrad and law students. And, I do have an optimistic view of the world. I think that a lot of these young folks are really interested in making things better and figuring out solutions to problems. But go into it like that, and I think the other thing that I would suggest to them is listen to other viewpoints, and you can argue whatever positions you want, but make them based on fact and not on alternative facts or things that you think are true. And that I think goes to everybody. And one of the things I think that this country is, with social media and just for whatever reason, we really don't have good discussions where we can hear each other and then agree to disagree, but not be in attack mode. And I think we've unfortunately gone to the place where everything's just mudslinging.
Right. I understand. Right. So if you could go back and do something different in your career, what would that be? How would you do it?
Well, that's a good question. If I had to do that, so one of the things I've done is I've been in law firms 3 different times in my career. I went into companies twice, and if I had to do it over again, I would probably not have made maybe those moves, just because it was disruptive and things of that nature. But not a lot I would probably change, honestly. I think I've lived a good life, and hope to live many more years of good life. Part of what I would try to do better is some of the stuff we're talking about is to constantly remind myself that we were born with two ears and one mouth, and so you use that proportion
Right.
best to listen more, and
Right.
But not a lot I would change. I like I said, I liked law school. I have no regrets about changing careers.
I
So
see.
yeah.
Okay. Very good. Wonderful. Okay, cool. And when it comes down to Democrats and Republicans of the past, things were totally different than they are now. Do you have any thoughts about, how you would like to see this world turn out at this point? Everything is just going haywire now. It's interesting.
Yeah. Again, I think that uh, there are a lot of issues facing us as a nation. To me, it's the greatest nation in the world. But I think there's a lot of issues, and I think that we need to stop, being so hyper partisan and seeing through blue or red lenses all the time. And like I said, there's a lot of issues going on. The Supreme Court came out last week on bump stocks and probably the correct interpretation of the statute, but we'll see if there's any movement on that in Congress. I just like you said, the parties have changed over time, and there's a lot of back and forth on that. You'll see that on social media all the time about which party is responsible for what. But like I said, we're at a stage, like you said, where it just seems hyper partisan, and I think that would benefit all of us to again sit at the table, think about what's best for everybody, right, and then find ways and paths to that. And I hold some optimism that can happen, but I think with the way that gerrymandering's worked, and I think the way that both Senate and House likely are to be very close for the foreseeable future, they might flip back and forth, occasionally. That there's no political points to be had, I don't think, and that's part of the issue we have right now is that folks just seem entrenched in their positions, and just it's all about getting one for the party and scoring one. And again, I think we've got lots of issues to face here to continue to be a nation that's united, and so we need to figure out how to solve those problems.
I see. Okay. Attorney Cotter, before we go, I know that you're a very busy man, so could you tell us about any current projects that you may be working on, or what else is in the horizons or whatnot for you?
No, not really. I've got I'm involved in various bar associations and things, and being the leadership in those, so that's taken up a lot of my time, and just helping serve my clients with their needs and help them navigate the troubles they have. People have asked me if I'm going to write a second book, and I've thought about it, but book writing is it's a lonely task. It's such a time-consuming task, and it's and I'm not sure that the return on time is there. But we continue to think about that, and so other than that, just keep writing and keep trying to make small dents and hoping to leave things better than I came across them. So that's really my goal.
We really do appreciate our guest who participated in this episode, and we hope you learned something that will bless your day and your life. For all who are interested in learning more about the Gary Clement Radio Show podcast, please visit www.amazon.com and order my book, The Gary Clement Radio Show, When Strong Afro-American Men and Women Stand Up. It covers everything about us and features a variety of Afro-American personalities who speak out about about the importance of education and literacy in the Black community. Well, we thank you for tuning into our podcast. Please send us your email address so we can contact you when we have new releases and new episodes and new projects as well. You can reach us at gccpresents@yahoo.com. And also, if you're interested in submitting any materials or want to get in touch with us, please do so by simply sending an email to gccpresents@yahoo.com.